Okay, so are we recording?
Yes, sir, we are recording.
Excellent. So good morning, everybody. My name is Bill McCamley. I'm the Secretary of the New Mexico Workforce Solutions Department. Joining me today for this presentation about opening up our workplaces safely is James Kenney, the Secretary of the New Mexico Department of the Environment, who is responsible for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration Office, or OSHA, here in New Mexico, and Secretary Jen Schroer, who is the Secretary of the Tourism Department and who is really assisting everybody in the state, specifically a lot of employers, with the resources that they need to open up safely. So I'll be starting, but before we move forward, for anybody on this press conference that wishes to ask questions, you should have a chat feature as a part of this online presentation. If you have a question moving forward, which we will answer at the end, if you could please enter who you are, what media organization you represent, who your question is targeted towards, and what the question is. And at the end, we will have Cody Johnson, the Public Information Officer for the Secretary of Tourism, read those questions to us so that we can answer them for you. We should also have Daniel Schlegel from the Governor's Office available to answer questions for anybody that wishes to ask one of him as well. So let me start with my presentation. Once again, I'm Bill McCamley, the Secretary of the New Mexico Workforce Solutions Department. Next slide, please. And why is opening the workplace safely important to us? Well, between mid-May and mid-July, there were between 150,000 and 157,000 certifications performed for unemployment insurance in New Mexico. That's a lot of people. And to give everyone a relative statement about where that is, in 2009, in March 2009, it was the height of the Great Recession. We had about 67,000 people certifying for unemployment. So we're at twice that number right now. And as I'll say later, the more we can safely open up our workplaces, the more people will get off unemployment and back to jobs, and that's our main goal. We were actually going to reinstate work search requirements, which are normally necessary under unemployment, this upcoming week, but we are pushing those as we've seen the virus spread a little bit more in New Mexico, and we've had to kind of push back our plans to reopen. At some point, workers in New Mexico who are on unemployment, the regular program, will be asked to perform work searches as part of their weekly requirements for unemployment, but we will let folks know when we get there as we see the numbers come down and all of us in the administration can proceed to open safely. Normally, and this is a very important part, workers can only get unemployment insurance if they leave their jobs through no fault of their own. Now, the only time you can leave your job on your own decision and get unemployment is if you have what is a legal term called good cause. And normally good cause in non-COVID times are things like there's unsafe working conditions, there's an abusive supervisor, that sort of thing. But during COVID, we are allowing for good cause to also encompass the areas of pre-existing conditions. So if you have, if you're a cancer patient, if you have serious asthma and can provide a medical provider's note on that, will allow you to get unemployment. Or, and this is important for this discussion, if you can prove that your workplace is not safe, if people are not wearing masks, if supervisors are not really pushing for social distancing and not doing all those things that we talk about in order to make workplaces safe, we will allow you to have unemployment if you can prove it. And we will be working with the OSHA office. So if they do an investigation of a business and find that businesses are systematically not quarantining sick patients, not making their staff wear masks, not social distancing, those sorts of things, we will be allowing for those workers as a safe alternative to that work to get unemployment. The safer our workplaces are, the more we as customers, as workers and employers do to make these processes safe, the more work places can open, the more we can get people off unemployment and back to work. And that leads us to our next slide, please. Thank you. So our department is going to be partnering with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration under Secretary Kenney to bring 20 new health and safety officers into the fold, as long as 4 administrative staff. We have tapped into $1.8 million of federal funding for what is called dislocated workers. So what that means is we are going to help unemployed people get these jobs with the state doing something useful. And that is going to be assisting businesses with doing the things that they need to do to open up safely. We've already had 60 people last week participate in a hiring event that our office is running, and we're doing everything we can to row in the same direction as the other folks in the governor's administration to get businesses open safely, to provide them the support that they need to open safely, and to make sure that our customers and our workers are safe. And with that, I will turn it over to Secretary Kenney.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you and to answer some, or to present some information and answer some questions that you may have. We can advance to the next slide. That would be great. All right, so the New Mexico Environment Department, we are an agency that has a lot of individual programs in our purview. So you may know us as the group that regulates air emissions, ensures that drinking water meets federal and state standards, as well as remediating wastes across the state of New Mexico. We have other programs, a number of other programs, including the Occupational Health and Safety Bureau, which administers the OSHA program in the state of New Mexico. And our mission does not change from whether we're protecting people from air contaminants or protecting employees in the workplace. Our mission is to ensure that New Mexicans have a prosperous environment for their current and future generations. This includes, again, protecting our essential workers or workers in the state of New Mexico. And our core values, I just want to take a moment to just say this, our core values are science, innovation, and collaboration and compliance. And those core values are, I think, definitely put in motion in the next few slides. So we will share some scientific information, the innovation that we're using between our agencies as we are here today, the collaborative efforts that are underway right now, and the notion of compliance permeates all that we do. So it's great to see those core values in motion. So let's go to the next slide. What you see here is essentially where COVID is showing up in the workplace. We call this rapid response. When an employee in the workplace tests positive for COVID, it triggers certain actions within the state. These are actions in which we, the New Mexico Environment Department, through our OSHA program, as well as the Department of Health, are collaborating on to make sure that those employees and workplaces are safe. This data that you see in front of you is a pie chart that shows where those rapid responses are taking place. This is data current through 7/12. You can find this information updated daily on NMED's website under the COVID response webpage. It's just on our front page. But what you'll see here is that we're seeing more positive individuals showing up in the food industries than we are in healthcare. And then healthcare is greater than retail and wholesale, and it goes around the chart that way. Where you see 31% of all other industries, that's where it's less than about 2%. So there's a hodgepodge of different industries in there, but they all tend to be less than 2%. So really our food industries, which includes our essential restaurant workers, as well as grocery store workers and the food manufacturing sector, are in that wedge of the pie chart. And more importantly, in the last week, 15% of the food industries, 15% of the rapid responses were at restaurants in particular. So you can see the concern we have with protecting workers in the restaurant industry specifically. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. When you look at when you think about the sectors and where we're seeing rapid responses, again, where an individual is positive, an employee is positive in the workplace, you can look back at the historic data and see that the number of rapid responses was relatively consistent at the end of May and then through June, until we got to the end of June, beginning of July, and then we started to see it double. So around June 22nd, we went from 30 to the week prior to 70, and then we jumped up to 165. Last week we're at 175, and those numbers continue to rise. And again, that's where we're seeing at least one individual showing up at a place of employment who is positive for COVID. So let's continue to the next slide. So what happens when an employee is positive? And we've been getting this question a lot, and it's a very fair question. Is it a violation of OSHA? What happens to the employer? What happens to the employee? And let me just say that having a positive employee in the workplace, provided the employer is mitigating that risk of spread quickly and following the public health order and the COVID safe practices, that tends to decrease the transmission of the disease within the workplace itself. And many employers are going above and beyond, and we really do appreciate that. I've been out to a number of different places, different employers in the state, and I've talked to many of them that are investing significant amounts of money, time, and energy into protecting their workers, and that is greatly appreciated. They're champions in stopping the spread of COVID. What does happen though is there's 5 things that will happen when an employee tests positive for COVID. You will be contacted by the New Mexico Environment Department and or the Department of Health. That contact usually happens within a day of us getting that information. So as soon as that information comes from the state lab to the Department of Health and NMED, you can expect that we will reach out to that employer and let them know there is a positive employee. They often already know that information, but in the event they don't, we do let them know there is a positive employee, and they have to temporarily cease operations. They have to agree to test and then direct those employees to self-quarantine. The employer also has to commit to retesting employers, typically within 7 to 10 business days, or 7 to 10 calendar days, I should say. They have to disinfect the workplace, and they have to implement a safety plan. The questions we often get around this is, do I have to close all my operations if the outbreak was or if the positive employee was in my shipping department? This is very nuanced, and we go through this in a methodical way with each employer, person to person, to talk about the practices that the employer was instituting, so that we can develop a tailored plan that is efficient for ceasing the spread of COVID, and cognizant of the disruption that this causes to the employer itself. So let's go to the next slide. So what happens when an employer violates the occupational standards of allowing COVID to not only come into their workplace, but then flourish in the workplace? Nobody is intentionally doing that. Our workers are our ability to keep our businesses open, and that is the goal here. In the long term, is to keep our economy going. But in the instance in which an employer is not taking the necessary steps, there are enforcement consequences for such actions. And I want to just say again, it's about making sure you're taking the steps and documenting that. And the instances where an employer says, I can't provide that information, I don't know, it is your obligation to know. And in the absence of information, you're leaving us at the Environment Department through our OSHA program no choice but to progress to one of these steps or multiple of these steps. And that means that we will post a notice of imminent endangerment on the door of the business. That is a notice by which we put up and we take down. It cannot be taken down by the employer, and that will remain in effect until the danger is mitigated. We can also move towards court action to restrain the dangerous conditions from existing. In other words, trying to make sure that those COVID-safe practices are put into place prior to the employer allowing employees or customers back into the business. And then there's a monetary fine of $131,000 for each violation that could be assessed in those instances. The good news here, and I put this at the bottom of the slide, is that by and large, New Mexico employers are working hard to keep their employees safe. With, I believe we have over 500 rapid responses in the state of New Mexico. There are just a handful that stand out where an employer did not want to go through those 5 criteria, could not document what they did. So I think employers, for the most part, are taking this very seriously, and we appreciate their efforts in doing that. So if you do go, let's go to the next slide. If you believe, or anyone were to believe, that their workplace was unsafe, you can report that to us and you can remain anonymous. And that is, there's a website on, an email address on the screen. You can email us and let us know, and we will investigate that as soon as our resources allow us to get to it. So with that, I'm going to pass this presentation over to Secretary Schroer in the Department of Tourism. So take it away, Secretary.
Thank you, Secretary. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Obviously, the theme of today is safety and how we can reopen our economy. But the only way we can do that is if we really take a proactive approach. Our businesses are informed, and our public, our consumers, are also participating in COVID-safe practices. So this is going to be a true partnership between the private sector, the public sector, as well as the general public, our consumers, and our media partners. So I want to say thank you for all of you joining today as we go through our presentation. Next slide, please. Through the tourism department's research, we know that consumers want to feel safe, and they are making their buying decisions based upon the perception of safety. So it is very important that our communities and our businesses continue to implement COVID-safe practices so that way they can reopen and have customers. We really need to build that consumer confidence. This is a research study done by Destination Analysts where they are asking the public, if they would no longer consider visiting a certain destination due to several different factors. And you can see that if number 7 is very interesting to me, if too many local residents are not wearing masks, they don't feel safe, they don't feel comfortable. And while New Mexico right now is not encouraging travel, this is a reflection of our consumers. So that's even our New Mexicans right here in our state that are looking to go back into restaurants, to go back into our retail stores, and get back to work. They want to feel safe. Next slide, please. So in this spirit, a group of tourism industry leaders a couple of months ago from across the state really took the lead to develop the New Mexico Safe Promise and New Mexico Safe Certified. It originated as a tourism pilot program, really, which has gained significant momentum. And I truly want to recognize the leadership and the commitment and the collaboration that we have seen from Kathy Comal at the New Mexico Hospitality Association, Jason Espinoza of the New Mexico Society of Association Executives. Their leadership and collaboration has really propelled this initiative, and now we are also expanding it. And every day we're seeing more partners come on board with both New Mexico Safe Promise and New Mexico Safe Certified. The New Mexico Restaurant Association is a partner, the New Mexico Brewers Guild, Visit Albuquerque, Farmington Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit Santa Fe, Visit Las Cruces, Visit Taos, Discover Ruidoso, Deming Luna County Economic Development, the Chamber of Commerce of Deming and Luna County, Town of Red River, Lovington Chamber of Commerce, Gallup-McKinley County Chamber of Commerce, the Taos Chamber of Commerce, and also the Albuquerque West Chamber of Commerce. So together, by us partnering and really amplifying the message of making the promise of wearing a mask, doing social distancing and really protecting ourselves and our families as we decide to live our lives and open our economy during a COVID positive world. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick little overview of the website of NewMexicoSafePromise.org. It launched in June and we've had nearly 2,000 people make the promise. And this promise is all about individuals doing their part to help open the economy safely. This includes wearing a mask. We know that if we can get 80% of New Mexicans wearing a mask, then it's going to make Secretary Kenney's job so much easier. We can take a proactive approach, but wearing that mask is so important. Since launching this campaign, New Mexico United and PNM also came on board as partners to help amplify the message. Next slide, please. Also, about a month ago, we launched a complimentary program, the New Mexico Safe Certified. Next slide, please. And this is free, on-demand, virtual COVID-safe practice training for businesses. And it's helped to ensure all of us, customers, employees, and families remain safe so New Mexico can remain open. We want our businesses open. We want people back to work. New Mexico Safe Certified wants businesses to know they're not alone. This is hard. This is really hard. And we want to provide the resources and the guidance to help businesses implement these to the highest level of excellence. And we also want customers to feel confident that they are safe when they go into these different businesses. And the goal is to really create a better space for all of us by providing education and training. And as our Department of Health updates that public health order, this training also gets updated very quickly. Next slide, please. Next slide, yes. So as of today, we've had over 1,000 businesses get started in the process. 265 have graduated and are officially certified. We have golf courses. We have nearly 500 hotels, offices, call centers, restaurants, retail, spas, salons, and tour operators. And today I'm very excited to announce that we're launching new training for other industries. Tourism was the pilot. It was a huge success, so we're expanding it based upon a lot of demand. We've gotten other industries asking for this type of training. So I want to say thank you for their partnership and interest. We now have grocery stores and farmers markets, construction and field operations, manufacturing, warehouses, food production, farm, dairy, ranch, producers and processors. So that is now launched officially today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to ask all the secretaries and panelists to mute their audio. We're going to launch today also and reveal our new campaign advertisement for New Mexico Safe Promise. This is really targeted to help remind our general public, our fellow New Mexicans, that it's going to take all of us for our economy to open. Because if we want our favorite coffee shop to stay open, or if we want our favorite grocery store or our favorite retail, we have to do our part as New Mexicans and wear a mask. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Cody to play the new TV asset. And it'll be a little jumpy because it's over the internet, but we'll also put the link to this in the chat so you can look at it later.
It's up to each of us to play it safe and slow the spread, so we can still
safely reconnect with friends, get our breakfast burrito fix, indulge in a little retail therapy,
or just unwind at the end of the day. Help keep each other safe.
and our favorite local businesses open.
Make the promise at nmsafepromise.org.
Thanks, Cody. Truly, we all want life to go back to normal, but it's not going to go back to normal for a while. And it's so important that during a COVID positive world, each of us are doing our part, and wearing a mask is part of that. Next slide, please. So here you can see a lot of our New Mexico Safe certified partners in action. They are just amplifying the message that they are certified. They're educating their customers. La Fonda, for example, educates and asks each guest to make the promise before they even book at their hotel. You have Routes, Bicycles, and Guides. You know, they're showing how they are SAFE certified and how they continue to implement those. So it's just so exciting to see businesses really just gravitate and own that they are going to make a commitment to keep their workers, to keep their consumers, and keep their community safe, because this is how we do it. Next slide, please. We also are seeing destinations that are committing to propel the message right in their communities. So here we have two signs. That one is in Santa Fe, the one on the left. It's in all their public spaces. In Taos, they have this poster up all through their downtown area. And then also, we did a letter to our neighboring two states, both Texas and Arizona, saying, hey, if you're going to come here, you really need to check our public health order first, because we do have different rules here, and we're asking you to wear a mask. And so this communication has really made a difference in a lot of communities, and we hope to see additional communities hop on board and do something similar. Next slide, please. So we just ask that we continue to, our media partners, to inform our business community and the public to look for that New Mexico Safe certified seal, that these are the businesses that have put their workers through training and are making a commitment to keep both their workers and their customers safe. So with that, I'd like to turn it over so we can have questions from all of our attendees today. As a reminder, we do have the chat function, but also I believe many of you submitted questions in advance. So I'm going to turn it over to Cody Johnson to go ahead and ask those questions.
Thank you, Secretary. Real quick, before we get to questions that were submitted during the webcast, to Secretary Schreier's point, we did receive a handful through the registration process prior to the webcast. So I'll just kind of go through those real quick. So the first question we received, workers in the entertainment industry are petitioning to extend the $600 a week for the $600 per week for the year. Would New Mexico support this call to the federal government?
I'll take that one, Cody. So right now, as everybody probably knows, one of the provisions of the Federal CARES Act, C-A-R-E-S Act, was to provide $600 additional payments to everyone on unemployment. Now that program will run out next week, so the week after that, because you always get unemployment benefits the week after you certify. So currently, as of now, the 26th of July, that week, 27th of July, will be the last week that people receive that money. Congress is talking about some kind of extension to this provision. We don't know where that is yet, but we are keeping our heads up, and we are very, very interested in what they come up with. And whatever they come up with, we'll be working to implement as fast as we can to make sure that whatever provision is extended, we can make sure it gets implemented and in play as soon as possible.
Thank you, Secretary. And apologies, thank you, Gabrielle Burkhart from KRQE, for submitting that question. The next question comes from Chris McKee with KRQE, and his question is, on masks, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham said, quote, "We're being very clear that warnings are not fair and not enough," unquote. Is the state taking a hard line on enforcement?
So this is Secretary Kenney, and I'll take that question. The answer to that question is yes, we are taking a hard line on enforcement. So in the occupational setting, masks based on the COVID safe practices are required. In some instances, face shields may suffice if there's a medical condition for that particular employee that they can't wear a mask, and we're handling those on a case-by-case basis. And if there are questions regarding to when a mask or some other type of personal protective equipment is required, they can certainly reach out to our Occupational Safety and Health and Safety Bureau for that clarification. And then with respect to, sort of the lay folks, if you're out, for example, when I go out in the morning and I ride my mountain bike, I put my mask on. And if I were stopped by the state police for not having a mask on, then I may face a citation for not wearing a mask. So that is something that our Department of Public Safety is working on. But I think the mask requirement is just that, a requirement.
And if I can add to that, Cody, real quick, this is Secretary McCamley. For employers, it is very, very important that you require all of your employees to wear masks. And if an employee applies for unemployment and they voluntarily left their job, and they can show that there's a systematic program in place at that employer, what that employer is putting into place where they're not asking their customers and their employees to wear masks, they will be, if they can prove it, they will be eligible for unemployment. So it's really important that employers take up this responsibility and do the right thing to protect their workers.
Thank you. The next question comes from us from Julia Goldberg with the Santa Fe Reporter, and her question is, will the website with the OSHA violations be kept up to date?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we've had roughly 300 complaints come in directly to New Mexico Environment Department's OSHA program. And those complaints, as they started to come in, we put them on an interactive GIS map so that anybody could look at that map and say that this workplace had a complaint. And as we resolve those complaints, we put the resolution on that GIS map as well. So you can interactively scroll through that map and look. We've had a delay in keeping that map up to date simply because our OSHA resources have gone to the ever changing or ever increasing rapid responses. As we bring on those additional workers that Secretary McCamley's office is helping fill at the Environment Department, we will get back to updating that GIS map. So you will see those 300 complaints as contrasted to those 500 and ever growing rapid responses, which are now on our website as well. So we can provide links to both the map as well, the map of complaints as well as the rapid responses. Our intent is to keep that up, not just for COVID purposes, but for every occupational health and safety complaint that comes into our department.
Thank you for that answer. The next question comes from Sam Smith with KOAT, and his question is directed towards Secretary McCamley. Is there a plan in place to extend unemployment benefits past July?
Yeah, so I think we already answered that question. Unemployment benefits will continue in perpetuity. Right now, there are two pieces to any unemployment payment. There's your regular, what is called a weekly benefit amount. And that number in regular unemployment is between $88 a week and $461 a week, and is calculated based on how much you've earned in the past year and a half. Those will continue. The question that we're getting quite a bit is for the FPUC, that stands for Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. That is the extra $600 per week that the federal government is providing for everyone who is on unemployment with their benefit at the end of each week. As I said previously, that program is set to expire at the end of July, and we are keeping up almost on a daily basis with the negotiations going on with Congress in Washington to figure out if they extend something, and if they do, what that looks like. And our people are on the ball. We've got our heads up, and whatever they come up with, we're going to work to implement that as fast as we possibly can.
Thank you, Secretary. That does it for the questions I received prior to the webcast. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Maddie Hayden to continue to ask some of the questions we received during the webcast.
Sure. Hi. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Question from Julia Goldberg for Secretary Kenney. Is the $131,000 fine specific to COVID-19 or already a law? And the second part of the question is, generally, are non-New Mexico employers like Walmart or other national employers complying?
That's a great question. So the $131,000 penalty is something that is authorized to the New Mexico Environment Department to issue for any occupational health and safety violation, COVID or non-COVID. So typically the way I like to think about this is you have physical, chemical, and biological concerns in a workplace. COVID is just that, a biological concern. So we have that ability to assess that penalty against any one of those hazards, and there may be others as well, but that's just a simple way to think about it. It's not a unique penalty to COVID itself. And then, Maddie, the second part of that question.
Are non-New Mexico employers not complying, such as Walmart national employers?
Sure. So that's an interesting question. As we look around at our rapid responses, where we have a positive employee, and then we also look at the complaints coming in, we are seeing that generally speaking, most employers are complying. It's when an employer cannot produce evidence of complying, that's when we have problems, or if there's actual spread in a workplace that is not mitigated by occupational measures in which they should have been requiring staff to use. I don't know that I have a data-driven answer for you on whether we're seeing more out-of-state employers versus in-state employers failing to comply. What I will say to you, and this is anecdotal and we can go through our own data, what I will say is we are seeing a lot of franchise big box locations. When they get a positive, it is sometimes harder for us to do our job because they're checking to see what the policies and procedures are out of state that should have been followed at that store. We're seeing that in franchise fast food restaurants. We're seeing that in, the big box retail. What I will say is, therefore, the independent businesses here in New Mexico can typically furnish that information faster, quicker, and dispose of the complaint or the rapid response in a more timely way. So we'll look into that and get a more data-driven answer. But that's an interesting question to ask, and one that has piqued my curiosity myself. Thank you.
Okay, so another one from Julia for tourism. Is there a list of all the businesses that are certified NM safe?
Thank you. Yes, you can go to newmexicosafecertified.org, and they will be launching a business directory very soon that will have a list of every single business that is certified.
Okay, great. And Secretary Schroer, while I have you, another question for tourism. Will New York putting New Mexico on its quarantine list hurt our tourism?
Thank you, Maddie. I think right now tourism is just really, really hard. We know that the virus spreads by people traveling around. It also spreads, within families. It spreads by going to different places like restaurants and retail and wherever, just like what Secretary Kenney was referring to. There are several travel restrictions across the nation and frankly across the globe, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So in regards for New Mexico tourism, most of our tourists come from our drive markets and our previous fly markets. And I say previous because most of our flights may not come back due to the pandemic. So a lot of that is, Texas, Arizona, Colorado. We do also get tourists from California. We've had Chicago as one of our fly markets for several years. But right now, it's just not the best time to travel. And so we really encourage folks that want to come here, just postpone your trip to when it's safe. And so, yes, New York did put restrictions on New Mexico, but it wasn't necessarily targeted in New Mexico. It was really looking at our numbers and our rate of spread. And so they made the very tough decision of identifying those states that have a higher rate of spread right now.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. This is the last question that we have right now from Bethany Freudenthal of the Las Cruces Sun News. For Secretary Kenney, can you please clarify from what date to what date the 15% of rapid responses involved the restaurant industry? And the second part of the question is, how many people working in the restaurant industry have been tested during rapid responses?
Sure. On the second question, we can total that up and find out how many people have been tested. I don't have that at my fingertips, and it's maybe an important distinction to make is that if you looked at, let's say, a fast food restaurant that maybe employs 50 people, and that fast food restaurant has implemented COVID-safe practices such that the Monday, Tuesday shift never comes in contact with the Wednesday, Thursday shift and things like that. They're doing some really good practices. Then we may not test everybody in that restaurant, depending on the practices of that employer. So scrolling down and looking through the number of employees at a given location is not reflective of the number of people that were tested. Because of the good practices that the restaurant industry is employing, we don't necessarily have to test everybody in order for us to assure that that infected person would not have infected other people. So we can get you that information. It's just going to take me a minute to total it on a spreadsheet. And to clarify the restaurant industry, I know this is the way we present some of the data. Everybody wants a different version of it, and it's understandable week to week what they might be interested in. So let me give you just a rule of thumb here and explain it this way. Typically, the food industry has been the largest industry for all of our rapid responses. Week to week, it has exceeded the healthcare industry, not by a large margin, but by enough for us to be concerned that people in the food industry have a greater food industry places of business are showing up more frequently than healthcare industry. So that, and when you think about where COVID is, you would think it's more in the healthcare industry, you would see this, but no, it's in the food industry. And by food industry, again, I mean restaurants, grocery stores, and food manufacturing. When we segregate out restaurants and only restaurants, it's typically been 14 to 15% of all our rapid responses since going back to May have been at restaurants. That has, no matter how many rapid responses we have, whether it was 30 in June or 175 last week, we're typically seeing that number around 15%. On any given day, we've seen it at as high as 20%, and we've seen it as low as 14%. But it's typically hovering around 15% on any given, when you look at the totality of data we're collecting. So I hope that's helpful to you, and we're happy to break down that data. Even some of the secretaries have asked for that exact data as well. So we will continue to put that on our website, speciated for the largest sectors that are having the most rapid responses.
Secretary Kenney, this is Dan Schlegel from the governor's office. Thank you for that info. And I'd just like to reiterate some of those points. It was an extremely painful decision to close down indoor dining. And I think to Secretary Kenney's point, this is a data-driven decision to mitigate spread. And excuse me, some of the restaurants have all the hallmarks of COVID risks, such as indoor individuals remaining in the space for long periods of time, and customers with no masks. So I think this is really a decision that was based on the data. Thank you.
Great. It looks like that's actually all the questions we've received. So if there's any secretary that wants to give any final thoughts, concluding words, I'll open it up. But that's all the questions we've received.
Yeah, Cody, this is Bill McCamley with Workforce Solutions. I would just like to say, look, please wear a mask, please socially distance, please do all the things that you know are the right thing to do. If we do that, we're going to open up more businesses, we're going to put more people back to work, and we'll get back to normal faster. The more we do the right thing, and the governor is very, very blunt about this, the more we do the right thing, the more we choose the right way to go, the better it's going to be for everybody. And thank you very much for the opportunity to have this conversation with you all today.
Yeah, Cody, I'll just, again, maybe we'll just go down the line here. You know, I think so we all have different roles and different responsibilities, but we come together as a cabinet to implement a common vision here. And that common vision is to protect New Mexicans and get our economy open, as Secretary McCamley said. We appreciate those employers and employees who are abiding by this. The public health order, they're actually moving us further and bringing us closer to reopening, and those that are not it's a problem, and it's something that we as a regulatory agency take very seriously. Whether we were holding a federal entity in the state of New Mexico accountable for a chemical or a radiological issue, we take that same level of commitment to implementing worker safety standards related to COVID, and we will continue to be out there holding up those who excel at protecting their workers as the example, and highlighting those that don't comply with worker safety standards and the public health order as those that are holding back the economy and punishing their industry.
Thank you. And I think my last words here today are, you know, my agency's role is to grow the economy. And right now, I cannot do that without the partnership, the compliance, and really the motivation of not only private sector, but also the general public. We need the general public wearing masks. So when they go into a business, they're not putting these workers in an uncomfortable position where they're asking general public to please put on a mask. You know, so the more that we have this partnership, the more New Mexicans can unite specifically around the mask issue. That's the only path forward I see for us to open up our economy. Is we really need to work together to be able to do this. And it's going to just require all of us to be uncomfortable and wear this mask. It's a new social norm. Usually it takes decades to really get social norms ingrained, but we don't have a decade. And we want people back to work. We want businesses to open their doors. And the only way we can do that is if we really work together and we just insist and wear masks and really implement those COVID safe practices. So I encourage, we just continue to spread the word, and we really look towards our media partners to help us with this on what those COVID safe practices are, where there are resources so businesses can get that free training at newmexicosafecertified.org. And the more we can propel and amplify that message, the better we're all going to be.
Thank you, secretaries, and thank you everyone for joining us today.